Hello and welcome to this video on deploying Microsoft Defender for Identity. This is the third video in the series of Microsoft Defender for Identity. In this video, I will talk about the deployment of the Microsoft Defender for Identity, connecting it to the Active Directory, and configuring the settings, best practices, and a demo of deployment of the Microsoft Defender for Identity. My name is Navneet Kumar. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer and the founder of TrainCrest Technologies. Learning objectives of this tutorial are Microsoft Defender for Identity installation overview, connect to the Active Directory, configuring the Microsoft Defender for Identity sensor, excluding entities from detection, working with sensitive accounts, and finally, I will take you through a demonstration on deployment and configuration of a Microsoft Defender for Identity sensor. So stay with me till the end of this video and do subscribe my channel for more updates. The deployment of the Microsoft Defender for Identity is a multi-step process. In the first step, we create a Defender for Identity instance. Then we download the MDI sensor, the installation package, and deploy it to the domain controllers or the federation servers or the certificate servers. These agents collect the data and then ingest this data to the Defender for Identity service, which is a central hub to process this data. In downloading the sensor, the package can be used on all the domain controllers. We install the MDI sensors on domain controllers. Then we configure the sensors communication. And in this communication, we have to enable the connectivity between the sensor and the service by opening required ports or configuring the proxy. We need to verify that the installed MDI sensor can communicate successfully with the cloud-based MDI service over the internet. The proxy related configurations we will look into. Then after the successful sensor deployment, the MDI console within the security portal will start receiving the data from the domain controllers, and that allows you to monitor user activities and configuring the alerts based on the activities in your network. There are a few additional considerations when you deploy the Microsoft Defender for Identity sensor, and optionally, the sensor deployment can be done on the federation servers or certificate services that I mentioned earlier. While primarily focused on the domain controllers, the MDI sensors can optionally be deployed on these ADFS and ADCS servers for broader identity security coverage. Post-deployment tasks are there. After the deployment of this sensor, you can further customize the MDI settings like entity tagging, alert tuning, or the integration with SIEM tools for more optimized security posture for the threats. Here in this architecture, you will notice that the Defender for Identity sensor is deployed on the domain controllers or ADFS or ADCS, collecting the data from the network and then sending it to the cloud instance of Defender for Identity. Connect to Active Directory is the next process. In this, the MDI sensor sends this data to the Microsoft Defender for Identity. It needs a connection to the Active Directory. As I mentioned in the previous slide, that MDI sensor is deployed on the domain controllers directly. So there is no requirement for a separate connection to be established with the Active Directory itself, because this sensor is placed on the domain controllers. If I talk about the placement of it, so MDI sensors are deployed directly on the domain controllers, and these domain controllers are connected to the Active Directory environment. So separate connection is not required. For this data collection, MDI sensors continuously monitor the network traffic on the domain controllers. Then this traffic includes the communication between the domain members and the Active Directory database. It essentially gives the MDI insights into the user's activities within the Active Directory. It does the automatic integration When you install this MDI sensor on your domain controllers and configure the MDI service in the cloud portal, the connection between the MDI and the Active Directory happens automatically. The MDI sensors leverage the placement of the domain controllers to access and analyze the relevant data from the Active Directory database because they are locally sitting on that domain controller. There is no separate installation or configuration steps required to connect the MDI sensors to the Active Directory, as I mentioned earlier. And as long as the MDI sensors are deployed on your domain controllers and the communication is successfully done between the MDI service and the sensors, they will automatically collect data about user activities within the Active Directory environment. Few additional configuration points are the permissions. The MDI service account you need to configure during the installation that requires the read access on all the objects in the Active Directory domain. So this access allows the MDI to effectively monitor user activities and identifying the potential security risks. Directory service account we can use, so we can ensure that MDI service account has the necessary permissions to access the and read the data from the Active Directory database basically. In a nutshell, MDI leverages its placement on the domain controllers to automatically connect and collect the data from the Active Directory environment and providing valuable insights into user activities and potential security threats within your identity infrastructure. Talking about the configuration of the Microsoft Defender for Identity Sensor, so we have the configuration for accessing sensor settings. We do the sensor settings to collect the data and send it to the instance, the cloud instance. Sensor details and the management and key sensor configurations we do for this sensor. Excluding entities from detections, and in this exclusion, and why do we do the excluding? First of all, let's talk about that. There might be some situations where you want to exclude specific entities like users, devices, IP addresses, or maybe domains. The exclusion is required for certain detections that we want to minimize the alerts or alert fatigue and focus on the higher risk events only. So there can be some methods that we can use for excluding such entities, such users, devices, IP addresses, or domains. They might be for testing use you are using. You know that there might be some incidents or alerts from these entities, so we can exclude them. There are two exclusion methods: exclusions by detection rules and then global excluded entities. So these are the two methods. Exclusion by detection rules is the approach that allows you to exclude specific entities from triggering alerts associated with the particular detection rule that you have. Whereas in global excluded entities, you create a global exclusion list that applies across all detection rules in the MDI. So it is not for a particular detection rule, it's for all of them. As the name suggests, it's a global setting. If I talk about in more details about the exclusion for by detection rules, basically, so we can do it for access the MDI console within the Microsoft 365 Defender portal. Through that, we can do it. We have the alerts section where from we can configure it. Shortly, we will see that how do we configure it. Then we have excluded entities button where from we can define that what entities we want to monitor and which we want to exclude basically. Then global excluded entities, we access the MDI console once again, and then from there, from the settings of the Defender for Identity in the portal, we select the identities, and then we have the global excluded entities that we can configure. If I talk about the pros and cons for both of them, or the comparison between these two, so this is about granular control versus efficiency. So exclusions by detection rule offers more granular control. Per rule, you can configure the exclusions, which entities are excluded for the specific activities you can define there. However, managing these exclusions for the large number of rules can be cumbersome process. Then for this sort of efficiency, the global excluded rules, which are, you can say, general rules for every detection rule applied, will be handy to configure. Global exclusion rules, when you are using, you need to use them cautiously. And why I'm saying so, because though it can be convenient for configuring these exclusion rules, but it is overly broad exclusion might prevent MDI from detecting genuine security threats involving the excluded entities, because they apply for all the rules. Working with sensitive accounts, in every environment we have some sensitive accounts, or we can call them the high privileged accounts. So they have more permissions. Then it becomes important to deal with these sensitive accounts. So we have different options to identify and work with these sensitive accounts in Defender for Identity. Number one is automatic identification. So MDI can automatically identify some high value accounts based on predefined criteria that we have defined. And this criteria typically includes the domain administrator account, service accounts with extensive permissions they have, or the privileged user accounts. Whereas we can manually tag them as well. So MDI allows you to manually tag additional accounts as sensitive accounts, and this can be useful for user accounts with access to critical data or systems, even if they don't meet the criteria of the automatic identification. Protecting the sensitive accounts with MDI is important, and it helps by enhanced monitoring. MDI devotes extra attention to activities involving sensitive accounts. This includes monitoring for suspicious login attempts, unusual access patterns, or potential lateral movement attempts within the network. We can do the alert prioritization, detection rules we can configure for these. As a best practice, we should use a principle of least privilege. We should grant only the minimum permissions necessary for the users to perform their job, and this will help in reducing the potential damage if the sensitive account is compromised. Next is multi-factor authentication. So use multi-factor authentication for these privileged accounts. The additional factor of authentications will reduce the chances of these accounts compromised. You need to regularly review and audit them. Then you can do the MDI alert tuning, where you can configure the MDI alerts to focus on activities most relevant to your organization's sensitive accounts. This can reduce alert fatigue and ensures the security teams prioritize the most critical events. We have to consider few additional things like the honey token accounts the organizations use. MDI supports the use of honey token accounts, and these are decoy accounts designed to trap the attackers basically. And you can tag honey token accounts as sensitive within the MDI to monitor for suspicious activities around them. Second thing to consider is Active Directory security. MDI works alongside your existing Active Directory security measures. Ensure strong security practices are followed within the Active Directory to compliant the monitoring capabilities offered by the MDI. Based on the discussion, let us jump into some of the questions of this module. Then I'll take you through a demo on deployment of the MDI sensor. The question is, Microsoft Defender for Identity offers security assessment. Which type of security does this assessment primarily focus on? Option A, network security vulnerabilities. Option B, identity and access management security posture. Option C, endpoint detection and response EDR capabilities. And option D, malware and virus protection effectiveness. Do let me know your answer in the comment section. Second question is, in the context of Microsoft Defender for Identity, what is primary purpose of lateral movement paths? Option A, to identify the most efficient routes for data replication. Option B, to visualize potential attacker movements within the network. Option C, to optimize user access control policies for different departments. Option D, to track legitimate user login activities across various devices. Do let me know your answers in the comment section. And now let's move to the demonstration on the deployment of Defender for Identity. To onboard the MDI sensor, I have logged into a domain controller. If I take you to the server manager of this machine, you will notice that this machine is Active Directory domain service, and as well as the certificate service is installed on it. So it's my domain controller, and there are few identities that I will be working with. And I want to detect the user activities and any sort of anomalies or threats with these identities with the help of Microsoft Defender for Identity. In this domain, this fictional domain is editum.com that I'm using. To install the Microsoft Defender for Identity sensor on it, I will have to download and install the package for this MDI. You can do it in different ways. Either you can download it from the Microsoft's download center directly, or I will also take you to the Microsoft's portal for Defender management. So this is security.microsoft.com. Microsoft has unified portal for all the different Defender services, be it Defender for Cloud Apps or Defender for Identity. You can do all from here, or Defender for Office 365. So security.microsoft.com. Here you will log in with your work account, and as I mentioned earlier, that you need to have the required licensing like E5 license. So this is included in that. Let me or there are a few other license types. If you have not watched my video, then please do watch that video for more details. I've done a video on licensing and technical requirements for the Microsoft Defender for Identity. I will log in here with my work account, and once I log into the security.microsoft.com portal, therefrom I can manage the Microsoft Defender for Identity. If you launch this instance for the first time for Microsoft Defender for Identity, it will take some time. So if you open this portal, and here on the left you will see different options available. I will skip this tour for now, and if I take you to the left side, there are different blades, and here you have the options for Microsoft Defender for Cloud App, for Office 365, Defender for Endpoint, identity related settings, and Microsoft Sentinel, all in single window. There is something called system, and you can go to this gear icon, system icon over here, and then you see the settings over here. If you go to the settings, then you will see the settings for different Defender services: Defender portal, Defender XDR endpoint, email and collaboration identities, cloud apps, and Sentinel. So here I have the Microsoft Defender for Identity, general settings for identities that I can do from here. So in the security.microsoft.portal, you need to go to the left to the settings, system settings, and then settings blade. There you will find identities, and this is where you click for the first time, so it will take some time to prepare your instance, so wait for some time. And once your instance is ready, then it will show you the sensors first of all under the general blade, and in this I don't have any sensor right now. So if I want to onboard any sensor, then I have the onboard sensor button over here, add sensor, and I can click on that, or I have add sensor over here. I can download the installer, and this is the access key that will be used to register this sensor with the instance of this MDI. So I will hit this button, downloaded. All I need to do is now I need to extract it. This sensor you see is by the name of Azure ATP, the Azure Threat Protection. It was known as, this service was formerly known as this ATP, and you need to run the setup, Azure ATP sensor setup file. For the registration, it will require the key that you can take from here when you add the sensor. So it gives you the option to download the installer and then copy this key to the clipboard. Language I will choose as English. The sensor is installed directly on your domain controller. and monitors local network traffic. The sensor also performs dynamic resource limitation based on the domain controller's load. Standalone sensor, or you are deploying it to the ADFS. Access key that is required here, so I will paste that key here to register it with the Microsoft Defender for Identity instance that is created in this tenant. Well, the installation of the sensor is completed. I will hit finish button over here. Shortly, this sensor will be onboarded and will be discovered by the Microsoft Defender for Identity instance and displayed here. I will pause the video for a while and will resume once this is displayed here. Well, the Defender for Identity sensor is onboarded and has been discovered by the Defender for Identity. As you see, this is London DC1, the domain controller sensor installed on that. Datum.com is the fictional domain. The service status is running and the sensor status is up to date. This is the version of the sensor 2.3239. The health IC is not healthy, but later I can configure that and I can fix any health related issues if I have. I see there are 3 issues related to this, like NTLM auditing is not enabled, number 1. Number 2 is directory service advanced auditing is not enabled on that, medium impact of it. And then sensor with non-optimal power settings. So power profile is not selected properly with this domain controller sensors. That has low impact actually. I can fix that later on. So I can also in fact go to manage sensor to decide that what traffic I want to detect from there. So this is going to be my domain controller in adatum.com domain. So this is the description I'm providing. Then capture the network adapter. I have one Ethernet adapter on that, from which I will capture the traffic on that network adapter. You can choose the one that you need to work with. We have directory service accounts and the managed action accounts over here. Number 1 is directory service account. That is a service account used to connect to the Active Directory. The sensor is connected to that using this, or you can provide the alternate account that need to be a domain user account. So you will provide your domain user account with the least privileges, the required permissions that you have that can connect to the Active Directory. So the sensor has already used an automatic account to connect to the Active Directory since it's installed on the domain controller. Second option is for the managed action accounts, that is used for the specific actions that you want to take in the Active Directory. So for performing those tasks, specific tasks, you can use this account. Right now it's using local account, but you can configure a different account again for this as well. There are a few key considerations about these two accounts. The directory service account and managed action accounts need to be domain user accounts, number 1. So both need to be the domain user accounts. Number 2 is you will follow the least privilege model to assign the necessary access only. Otherwise, you can have unauthorized access provided. And next is about this, both of the accounts. You will be using them for separate purpose, so you can separate them from each other. Like managed action account, you need to be very careful because it will be used to assign or to perform these specific tasks, so that you can do. So these are the options on setting up the directory service accounts and the managed action accounts. These accounts are used by your MDI sensor to connect and manage the Active Directory related objects. We can configure it for radius in case you are using this remote authentication dial-in user service that is used to do the authentication for the VPN clients connecting to your network. So you can redirect them to the radius servers you have set up of the radius servers and the Radius servers are actually doing the authentication, so you can do the monitoring of that also from here. So this is also configurable. Then adjust alert thresholds, so we can configure the thresholds like for security principal reconnaissance, LDAP, for high suspected ADFS DKM related alert, so you can configure them accordingly. Then we have about for this defender for identity instance. I talked about entity tagging earlier. So entity tagging, sensitive tag accounts, first of all, I can tag that, okay, these accounts are my sensitive accounts, high privileged accounts, these accounts are, and I want to prioritize the auditing of these accounts. For instance, this Grace user is a privileged account. I have set it up. Any user device group you can configure. Honey token accounts are used to attract the attackers. So I can configure a account that I'm using for honey token purpose, and I want to prioritize the auditing of this account as well, so I can do this through the entity tagging. I can use these entity tags while I will be defining the detection rules. Then exchange server I can configure. Coming to the actions and exclusions, so I can define the exclusions based on two methods, like global excluded entities will be excluded from all detection rules. These can be users, domains, devices, IP addresses. So for an instance, this user Jack is going to be the excluded identity. Maybe this account I'm using for testing purpose. I do not want any alerts related to that. So for such users, domains, devices, IP addresses that you are using for testing purpose, or for any other reason you do not want to audit them and you want to reduce the noise of the alerts, you can do that. Exclusion is possible through the detection rules as well. You can go to the particular detection rule and configure it. So here you have the options to add the users, devices, or IP addresses into these detection rules, and these detection rules will not apply on these particular identities that you have configured here. For instance, this user is going to be excluded from this detection rule of abnormal ADFS authentication. So this is how we can reduce the alert fatigue or reduce the noise of these alerts. Finally, we can do the notification related setting, and in the notifications we can configure the notifications email ID, the recipient email ID, that who will receive the emails for health issues related notifications, or for alerts notifications, who will be responsible to working with that, or syslog notifications, so that we can configure to notify the administrators or security teams. These notifications can be configured over here. This is our sensor that was onboarded, and that's all about this deployment of the Defender for Identity sensor in a nutshell. With the help of this agent deployed on your domain controllers or federation servers or certificate servers, you can monitor your network data. I hope this video was informative to you. Thanks for watching, and do subscribe my channel for more videos. In next video, I'm going to show you how to work with the Microsoft Defender for Identity detection rules and to detect, investigate, and work